Welcome to the Sage's Tranquil Path, a magical journey designed to guide you into a peaceful night's rest. If you find this journey to be both soothing and comforting, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more audio content created with deep, loving intentions to encourage sleep. Before we begin the story, I'd like to offer a moment of gentle preparation. If you're not interested in the breathing guidance, you can skip to the chapter timestamps in the video description. Take a moment to settle into your most comfortable position. Let your body sink deeply into your resting place, feeling fully supported and at ease. Adjust your blankets or pillow, creating a soft sanctuary that embraces you completely. This is your time to release the day's tensions and invite tranquility into your evening. We'll begin with a soothing breath. Slowly inhale through your nose, allowing the air to flow as gently as the magical currents in our story. Feel the breath moving like a soft wind through an enchanted forest, carrying with it a sense of calm. As you exhale through your mouth, imagine releasing any worries, letting them dissolve like mist in the morning light. Our story follows Kai and Loren, a young apprentice and his wise mentor, as they journey through the Verdant Reach, a magical landscape where healing springs whisper ancient wisdom. With each breath, imagine yourself walking alongside them, feeling the soft moss beneath your feet, experiencing the profound magic of quiet understanding. If your mind wanders, that's perfectly natural. Let your thoughts drift like the wind dancers in our tale, soft, ethereal, without attachment. Gently return your awareness to your breathing or the sound of my voice. There is nothing you need to do now except listen and allow the story to carry you into a peaceful, restorative rest. Chapter 1. The Soft Echoes of Beginning. The first light of dawn crept across Loren's cottage like a careful apprentice, tracing delicate fingers along weathered wooden floors and illuminating the intricate map that lay spread before Kai. Each crease and faded line told a story more complex than mere geographical markers. They were pathways of memory, whispers of magical currents that flowed beneath the visible world. Kai's fingers hovered just above the map, never touching but somehow communicating. He understood, even at his young age, that some connections transcended physical contact. His breath moved in rhythm with the subtle pulse of the landscape outside, a synchronicity that spoke of the deep magic Loren had been teaching him these past years. The healing springs are not destinations, Loren said, her voice a soft cascade of wisdom. They are conversations waiting to be understood. She moved about the kitchen with the grace of someone who had long ago learned the art of listening to silence. Ceramic cups clinked with a musical precision. Dried herbs released their subtle fragrance, each movement a careful ritual. The Verdant Reach existed beyond the cottage windows, a landscape of extraordinary gentleness. Mountains folded like ancient beings taking a deep, slow breath. Forests held memories older than human understanding. Magic here was not a spectacular display of power, but a delicate ecosystem of connection, of subtle energies, breathing in perpetual conversation. Kai watched his mentor absorbing more than her words. The way she selected a tea leaf, the precise angle of her wrist as she poured water, the almost imperceptible shimmer of magical energy that accompanied even the most mundane actions. These were his true lessons. Magic, he was learning, was not about grand gestures, but about profound attentiveness. "We will follow the currents," Loren explained, her finger tracing an invisible line on the map that seemed to pulse with its own soft luminescence. "Not as conquerors, but as listeners. The springs do not reveal themselves to those who demand, but to those who are willing to be patient." Her eyes met Kai's, and in that moment, generations of magical understanding passed between them, a transmission more powerful than any spoken instruction. As morning light continued its gentle traverse, the cottage seemed to breathe with anticipation. Their journey would not be a dramatic expedition, but a careful pilgrimage of restoration. The healing springs waited, not with urgency, but with the quiet confidence of ancient magic that understood the profound power of waiting. Kai felt the landscape's rhythm matching his own heartbeat, a soft, steady pulse of possibility, of connection, of magic that existed in the spaces between breaths. Chapter 2. Whispers of the First Path. The morning mist hung like translucent veils across the Verdant Reach, transforming the landscape into a realm of soft-edged possibilities. Kai's first steps beyond the cottage felt like entering a living, breathing canvas where every movement created ripples of magical potential. Loren walked slightly ahead, her silhouette blending with the landscape, not leading but guiding, her presence a gentle invitation to understanding. "Magic flows like water," Loren murmured, her hand brushing against a moss-covered stone that seemed to shimmer with an inner luminescence. "It finds its path not through force, but through subtle understanding." Kai watched how her fingers barely touched the stone, yet something profound passed between her skin and the ancient surface, a conversation too delicate for words, too complex for ordinary perception. The path they followed was not a path in the traditional sense, but a living thread of energy that wound through the forest. Luminescent lichen traced intricate patterns along tree roots, creating soft blue-green trails that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. Kai noticed how each step created barely perceptible vibrations, how the landscape responded to their presence with a quiet, almost musical acknowledgement. Wind dancers, ethereal beings barely visible to the untrained eye, drifted between branches, carrying whispers of memory and potential. They moved with a grace that suggested they were more thought than substance, their edges blurring into the morning light. Loren acknowledged them with the subtlest of nods, a gesture that spoke of deep respect and long-standing communion with the magical ecosystem surrounding them. As they moved, Kai began to understand that their journey was less about destination and more about attunement. Each breath synchronized with the forest's rhythm, each moment an opportunity to listen rather than observe. The magical currents around them were not static, but fluid, constantly shifting and reforming like delicate breath on a cold morning. By midday, when soft golden light filtered through the canopy, they paused in a small clearing where the first whispers of the healing springs could be heard not as a sound, but as a subtle vibration that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Loren turned to Kai, her eyes reflecting generations of magical understanding. "Sometimes," she said, her voice as soft as the surrounding moss, "the most powerful magic is the magic of patient listening." Chapter 3. The Listening Grove. The grove revealed itself not with dramatic flourish, but with a quiet unveiling that seemed to breathe with ancient understanding. Soft tendrils of mist wove between trees that stood like silent guardians, their bark etched with memories older than human comprehension. Kai felt the landscape shift around them, a subtle transformation that spoke more in whispers than declarations. "Here," Loren said, her voice barely disturbing the surrounding stillness. "Magic does not command. It listens." Her hand hovered above a cluster of moss-covered stones, each one vibrating with an energy that seemed to pulse in harmony with her own heartbeat. Kai watched, transfixed, as barely perceptible threads of luminescence began to weave between her fingers and the ancient stones, a conversation happening in a language beyond words. The trees in this grove were different from any Kai had encountered. Their branches seemed to bend not with wind, but with memory, each movement a careful recollection of centuries past. Tiny wind dancers, ethereal beings of pure magical essence, drifted between leaves, carrying fragments of stories too delicate to be spoken aloud. They moved like thought itself, their edges blurring with the surrounding light, creating a living tapestry of magical interaction. Loren began to teach Kai the art of magical listening, a practice far more complex than mere hearing. "Feel how the landscape breathes," she instructed, her eyes closed, her consciousness expanding beyond physical boundaries. Kai discovered that listening was about more than sound. It was about sensing the subtle currents of energy, understanding the conversation happening between stone and spirit, between memory and potential. As afternoon light filtered through the canopy, creating soft golden pathways between the trees, Kai felt something fundamental shift within him. The grove was teaching him that magic was not about control, but about connection. Each breath became a dialogue, each moment an opportunity to understand the profound interconnectedness of all living things. The wind dancers seemed to dance around him, their movements creating intricate patterns that spoke of ancient wisdom and subtle magic. By the time twilight began to paint the grove in soft violet and indigo hues, Kai understood that this place was more than a location. It was a living entity, a keeper of memories, a bridge between what was and what could be. Loren watched him with eyes that held generations of magical understanding, a quiet smile playing at the edges of her lips. "Some lessons," she whispered, "cannot be taught. They can only be experienced." Chapter 4. Currents of Restoration. The first healing spring revealed itself not as a dramatic cascade, but as a subtle gathering of waters that seemed to breathe with an inner luminescence. Soft light filtered through surrounding stones, casting delicate patterns that danced like memories across the surface. Kai understood immediately that this was no ordinary place, but a sanctuary where magic collected itself, where healing existed as a living, breathing entity. Loren moved with a grace that suggested she was more spirit than physical form, her movements creating gentle ripples in the air around her. "Restoration is not about forcing change," she murmured, her fingers hovering just above the water's surface. "It is about remembering the original harmony." Kai watched, transfixed, as the faintest threads of luminescent energy began to weave between her hands and the spring. A conversation happening in a language more ancient than words. The magical restoration began as a soft pulse, barely perceptible at first. Like the gentlest of heartbeats, energy began to flow through the spring's hidden currents. Kai felt something profound shifting within him, not just an external magic, but an internal awakening. Each breath he took seemed to synchronize with the spring's rhythm, each moment a delicate negotiation between what was and what could be. Wind dancers emerged from the surrounding stones, their ethereal forms creating intricate patterns that suggested more than mere movement. They were memory made visible, magical currents given momentary shape. Kai realized they were not just witnesses, but participants in this profound moment of healing. Their dance told a story of connection, of subtle energies finding their way back to balance. As twilight began to paint the landscape in soft violets and indigo, the spring's restoration reached a crescendo of quiet power. The luminescence grew not with dramatic brilliance, but with a soft, persistent glow that spoke of ancient promises being remembered. Loren turned to Kai, her eyes reflecting generations of magical understanding. Some healings, she whispered, happen so softly that one might miss them if not truly paying attention. In that moment, Kai understood that magic was not about grand gestures, but about patience, about listening, about allowing natural currents to find their way home. The spring continued its subtle transformation, a living testament to the profound power of gentle restoration. Chapter 5. Resonance of Connections. The landscape of the Verdant Reach seemed to hold its breath, anticipating something profound. Kai stood at a threshold between what had been and what was becoming, his consciousness expanding beyond the physical boundaries of his young form. The multiple healing springs they had touched throughout their journey now vibrated with a subtle, interconnected energy like delicate threads of luminescence, weaving themselves into a living tapestry. Loren watched her apprentice with eyes that held generations of magical understanding. Magic is not a force we control, she said softly, her words floating like mist between them, but a conversation we are privileged to join. Her fingers traced invisible lines in the air, revealing subtle connections that pulsed within inner light pathways of energy that connected stone to spirit, memory to potential, teacher to student. Something was happening within Kai that transcended mere learning. His understanding was transforming from intellectual comprehension to a profound, visceral knowing. The landscape around him was no longer a separate entity, but an extension of his own consciousness. Each breath became a dialogue, each moment an opportunity to sense the intricate web of magical currents that flowed beneath the visible world. The wind dancers, those ethereal beings of pure magical essence, began to gather, their forms creating intricate patterns that suggested complex communication. They moved around Kai like thoughts given momentary shape, their edges blurring with the surrounding light. He realized they were not merely observing, but participating in this moment of magical awakening, bearers of ancient wisdom that spoke in the language of subtle vibration. As twilight painted the verdant reach in soft violets and indigo, the multiple healing springs began to pulse in a synchronized rhythm. Their energies intertwined, creating a network more complex and beautiful than any deliberately constructed magical system. Kai understood now that true magic was not about control, but about listening, about allowing natural currents to find their way home, about recognizing the profound interconnectedness of all living things. Loren placed her hand gently on Kai's shoulder, a touch that felt like a blessing, a transmission of understanding that transcended words. "You are not just learning magic," she whispered, her voice as soft as the surrounding moss. "You are remembering something your soul has always known." And in that moment, Kai felt the entire landscape breathe with him, a singular, profound exhale of magic, of potential, of endless possibility. Chapter 6. The Quiet Transformation. The final morning of their journey arrived not with fanfare, but with a soft, luminescent breath that seemed to emanate from the landscape itself. Kai stood at the edge of a clearing where multiple healing springs converged, their energies weaving together like threads of living light. The Verdant Reach spread around him no longer just a landscape, but a living, breathing entity that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. Loren watched her apprentice with eyes that held entire histories of magical understanding. "The most profound transformations," she said, her voice as soft as the morning mist, "happen so quietly that one might miss them if not truly paying attention." Kai felt the weight of her words settling into him, not as a burden, but as a delicate revelation. He understood now that magic was not about grand gestures, but about the subtle art of listening, of allowing. The wind dancers, those ethereal beings of pure magical essence, gathered around them, their forms creating intricate patterns that spoke of ancient wisdom and unspoken connections. They moved like thoughts, given momentary shape, their edges blurring with the surrounding light. Kai realized he could now perceive their language not in words, but in subtle vibrations that resonated deep within his core. Something fundamental had shifted during their journey. Kai was no longer just an apprentice learning magic, but a conduit of something far more profound. The healing springs pulsed with a synchronized rhythm, their energies intertwining like a living network that breathed with the landscape. He could feel the delicate threads of magic connecting everything, stone to spirit, memory to potential, teacher to student, past to present. Loren's hand rested gently on his shoulder, a touch that felt like both a farewell and a beginning. "You have learned," she whispered, "that true magic resides in the spaces between breath and silence, between memory and possibility." Tears formed in Kai's eyes, not of sadness, but of a profound recognition. He understood now that their journey was never about destination, but about transformation. As the first light of day painted the Verdant Reach in soft golds and greens, Kai felt the entire landscape exhale with him. He was changed, yet entirely himself. Magic was no longer something external to be learned, but a living conversation he was now a part of. The springs continued their gentle pulse. The wind dancers drifted like memories, and the world breathed on infinite, mysterious, endlessly beautiful.